Welcome to the continuation of the Aligned Life, the Goddess Life, our Tarot Tuesday episode with Layne Hallie as we dive into the first half of the Major Arcana. So join us as we move through a few more cards all the way up to the Wheel of Fortune before we dive in next week. Thank you for listening.
Hierophant then leads us into the Lovers. So now that we've determined, where we stand, how we're showing up in the world, what we've gotten insight inside of us, now we're engaging with other people. The Lovers isn't necessarily just a card of, oh, you found your love, you found your twin flame, blah blah blah. It actually has a deeper meaning in it's the commitments and connections that we then make with other people. It can even be kind of summed up as the contracts that we make, whether it's an actual like signed contract or just in your heart what you're committing to for another person. And this kind of brings into more of that, how are you showing up then with the people around you? When you get into that awakening moment with the Fool, you're like, okay, there's something bigger jumping in. You've done all this inner work, you know, and you're starting to craft how you want your life to show, how you want to show up in your life. Well, now you also have to relate to the other people around you. And that's where the Lovers card starts to come in. You'll find sometimes when you come out of that closet of awakening, you don't always know how to communicate that or relate to people. So how this is the how you do that.
Oh yeah, I also see it heavily as commitment and finding that harmony in life in those people and those connections that you make. But I really like it also for commitment and having to, like, when you decide in the Hierophant where it is your beliefs lie,
Mm-hmm.
using the Lovers to push yourself forward with that confidence and strength that we kind of tapped into earlier in the Fool,
Mm-hmm.
and using that to like dig those roots in and stay your course.
Yeah, right. And doing so, the Lovers is all about the choices you make. So what are you choosing to commit yourself to or choosing to walk away from?
Oh, yes. And in looking at when we look at the symbology of the Lovers, there's so many different balances there. There's this the union of the serpent and the apple tree, which is
Mm-hmm.
very it's very Christian in its idea, but it has a purpose. And then the tree of flames representing the passion and everything kind of coming together in this I mean it's essentially the Garden of Eden. But it is all coming back together to show this synchronous conscious nature of how things work together.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Exactly. And I think the imagery is just another example of how tradition and story has carried over into now. And so it's represented with that Garden of Eden story, but it comes from a deeper place. And it's that taking the choice within our own selves, Eve, to for the knowledge of good and evil. It's wanting that knowledge and choosing to make the choice to know to then make more choices in our life, educated choices. And what are we tying ourselves to? And with the people around us, like who are we committing ourselves to? If they are they going to uphold and elevate us and have our back and help us grow and grow with us? Or are they going to constrain you and put all these um conditions on what loving them and being loved by them looks like. It
Right.
really, and so there's a lot of Gemini energy in the Lovers card. It's astrological ties the Gemini. And so you do have to kind of play your own devil's advocate here to look at everything and see what it this is for me or not. Um, yeah.
Oh yeah, that like I said, that commitment. You got you gotta dig those roots in, man.
Yeah.
You gotta know where you stand. Um
Hmm.
and you have to put your whole behind it. When you, and this has been a recurring theme in this, but also kind of going back into the idea of like Ren's question too, when you question yourself, that's when you start seeing so many different imbalances. When you take your power out of yourself and move it into other people, other things, that is when you start to see all of these imbalances.
Hmm. Hmm. I know. I think of when I was in college and I was looking to my professors to tell me how to do this, how to do life, and they all had a different thing to say, and I'm trying so hard to do it in their way, right? And then coming back into learning from myself and through experience and going, I have to trust myself when I've taken on too much, when I'm ready to take on another thing. It's a personal journey of trusting yourself. And it's not to say that like you can't question yourself to a degree, because I mean, if you have triggers show up or you have feelings showing up, to ask why or how I reacted the way that I did. It's more when you get that knowing and you just feel so centered in it and you're like, yep, this is where I'm at and this is how I feel, to trust it. Because our mind will think us out of feeling angry about something. And then we continue with, here we are at the Lovers card, continuing to commit to something that is unhealthy, right?
Yes.
So paying attention to those subtle things.
Oh yeah. And to also touch a little bit on that idea of like self-evaluation is
Mm-hmm.
normal. It's healthy. It is also represented, as we will get there. It's represented in these cards. We're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to question truly everything. It is in
Yeah.
our nature and in our consciousness to do so. When you stop questioning things and when you stop allowing other bits of information to, I don't want to use the word influence, but at the same time, it is very much influence. But when you stop taking it, when you stop learning other aspects and cut off and you put these blinders on, then that is when you start losing connection. You start having problems. Your intuition starts to fall off. It's very reminiscent of those hidden voices of like different stories you may hear that are only told from one perspective. You don't
Mm-hmm.
get the whole picture without all of these other aspects coming in. And that at face value sounds so overwhelming,
Yeah.
but that is where your discernment comes in, and you can sit down with your self-evaluation
Yeah.
and be like, okay, what do I align with? When you stand tall in your roots in that lover's
Mm-hmm.
card, in your commitment and your harmony, you can say what aligns with what I already know
Yep.
and what grows that.
Right. And not to solely defer to what other people have to say. I mean,
Yes.
gather information as needed, but it's not solely up to them to decide how you feel. So, gathering information, but then how do you choose to, what am I trying to say? Just how do you choose to either take that on or let it go? Either take that on and be like, yep, that's me, that's my problem, or nope, I'm not going to own that. Sorry. Thanks, but no thanks.
Right. And that leads us straight into our next card, which is an action card, a card
Mhm.
of determination, the Chariot.
Right. So now that you've weighed through all the what's mine, what's not, what am I committing to, what am I not committing to, and you've made that decision, now you have momentum and now
Yes.
you're moving.
The wheels are going and you are on a train, kind of whether you want to be or not at that point. You are just moving so much forward. And there is evolution, there is strength, and all of this, again, determination. This is willpower.
It is. It's totally willpower and getting your heading and saying, I am this and I'm going there. And you just go. You go for it. Um and so Chariot is tied to Cancer, which I always think of somebody who's got this like tough exterior. They know where they want to go and they're just going for it. But then they also, from an internal place, they've softened. They've softened to themselves, they've softened to the experience, and softened to others. So there's an understanding that, yes, I am going that way. I am going that way. And I know the implications of it.
Yes. One of my favorite parts of the Chariot, and half of this I feel like everyone understands, but the other half of it I feel kind of gets lost in translation sometimes. So the Chariot in the Rider Waite deck is being pulled by two Sphinxes. One is
Mm-hmm.
white and one is black, but they're also pulling in opposite directions. They're going slightly off center, both of them, and it is the willpower of the charioteer keeping them in direction.
Yes.
And that is my favorite part because it is sheer resolve and willpower to hold
Yes.
that balance.
Right. Yes. You're the one. Yes. Absolutely. You're
You're
the
in
one at the reins
control.
of your life. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
you
you'll
are
want
in
to.
control.
Yeah. And you'll want to get pulled to a side or the other. But it's your resolve to stay the course, whatever that choice was for you.
And when we start to look at the deeper parts of the symbols that we see in it, behind the chariot is a river. And
Mm-hmm.
that is pulling in that synchronicity, that idea of following that rhythm of life, of the intentions that you're setting, what is in those synchronicities, not coincidences, synchronicities, and
Mm-hmm.
holding yourself in that little lane. So also kind of coming back to what Ren said, the chariot is energy. Like if you want to sit and meditate with some cards that will help you to connect further with your spirits and your spirit guides, the chariot is a really good one to sit with. Because also at face value, like when you think about it, the chariot also represents that you're on the right path. It's confirmation that you know which way you're going and you're taking advantage of that. Um, so
Yep. And
sitting with it will help a lot.
yeah, and having that river behind you also represents that you've overcome the emotional part of it. And I feel like a lot of decision making as a human being is getting through how it feels, the emotion tied to it. Because I think for any big decision, there is a little bit of regret, maybe some sadness that you have to make that decision or the way that, it's going. Like maybe you're going to have to tell somebody something that they don't want to hear, but for you to move forward and through it, you've got to just say the thing or do the thing. And so you've conquered the emotion behind it, right? And you're not just either too elated or too saddened by it, but you've, again, that word resolve just keeps coming back. So you've crossed the river the emotions, and you realize that you're the master. You're the one sitting in the chariot. You're the master of your own your life. And if you let go of the reins, you can get completely overwhelmed by everything, right?
Yes.
So it's holding tight to what you know is true, and it's from that personal place about yourself. What is true about me and how I want to show up and how I want to move through the world, because it's different for everybody.
Yes. And if it is out of alignment, that lack of direction, knowing the other cards, you can go back in and see where maybe you gave away your power. Maybe you let something throw you out of the harmony that you have been carrying or working towards. And maybe there is a place where you need to go back and find that balance. And that is both that, whether it be too much into the darkness or too much into the light.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, you can go back and evaluate that self-evaluation again and see where you need to pull yourself back into direction.
Absolutely. And that's a beautiful thing. You can always stop and reevaluate, stop and go back, and again, it's all in the cards. Go back to that magician. What are the new tools that you collected that you didn't know you needed until now? Let's study our tools. Let's learn how to use them properly, move through what that means for you and each card, and come back to this place. There's no shame in it. And I think that there's a lot of societal shame around, like, well, I should be further than I am. Well, maybe you didn't. Maybe you needed to go back and just recollect and find again what was the spark of inspiration to move in that direction? What does that mean for you? What are you going to commit to? And now where are you going to go with it?
Oh yeah. And I love those memes that we see on Facebook where it's showing that, certain people didn't do certain things, like famous people didn't do certain things until they were in their late 30s, 40s, 50s, sometimes even 60s.
Right?
It is never too late to go back and reevaluate.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. I love that. That's so it's really inspiring for me, because I feel like for our generation, we were raised and set up that, okay, by this time you would have school, and by this time you'd have a family, and by this time you'd buy a house. And all that's been kind of blown out the wayside. Like, so many of us are not anywhere close to home ownership. Those milestones just don't make sense anymore. And so it's okay. Stop, reevaluate. What are your priorities? Where are you going? And then see what path you make. We're forging new paths all the time. What's good and true for you?
Oh yeah. And that that leads us into our next card, that infinite potential and wisdom that we find in strength,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which
And it comes from a place of having made decisions and having
yes.
made choices and learning from them. That's the justice card is coming from a place where you've already made your fuck ups. You've done these things, and now you can come back to it from a place of where you're kind of impartial to judgment, right? It's
Yes.
a wisdom gained, so that there's a difference between a younger person who's like, oh, I would never do that, like especially like people that never had kids and maybe want to. They're like, I'd never let my kid do that. Well, give yourself some years of having children, and you learn.
Oh
Maybe
yeah.
I'm not so
Oh yeah.
strict on that. Yeah.
And you also realize through your own experience and through that evaluation, like, what was important
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and what really held meaning. And looking at it also from like a shadow work and like a trauma perspective, you also have those aspects where it's like, okay, well, what really did not work for me?
Yep.
And
For me. Yep.
right. And what affected me forever that maybe could have been like a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
And was it necessary? And you can see what decisions you'll make through those. Um and I I really, really love that. Coupling with that idea, the symbology of the lion that we see in strength. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because the lion has so many meanings, and um to stroke the ego of Leo's for a little bit.
Wait a
Um,
minute. Wait a minute. The next card, if I'm, am I looking at, is from the Chariot? We move to the Justice card, love. Strength is coming, right? Am I looking at this right?
in my deck, strength is number 8.
Oh, is my book out of order? Hmm. Sorry, I was just following along with this cool book that I
No,
have.
you are so fine. Now I'm looking things up. Hold on.
Now I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Let me pull out another book because I turned the page to Justice and I'm just trusting that my book is following along well. So
Well,
let me see.
sometimes, okay, so strength is number 8, but I'm wondering, I, I
Because I have
wonder,
strength after the Wheel of Fortune, and in the Thoth deck, it goes from the Chariot to, it's called Adjustment in the Thoth deck, which is one of my main decks that I love. That's the one that was developed by Aleister Crowley. Um,
oh, okay, so justice is traditionally the 8th card, and strength the 11th. But in the Rider Waite deck, they switch the orders to make them fit
oh,
astrological correspondences that worked with the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn.
oh, because I do have my Rider Waite deck sitting here, but I didn't pull it up. I was
That's
just going with
so
the deck. I
interesting.
didn't know that. I mean, I knew that like some decks do play a little bit with order.
Right.
Um,
Well, and some
but
decks
I
have
didn't think it
totally
was
different
that
cards in them
different.
too.
We're talking about two different things. I'm sorry.
I mean,
So
but
which one are we talking about now? Do we want to
I
go to
was talking about strength.
Okay,
Um,
let's do it.
but the interesting thing is that those still fit though.
Yeah.
Which is so,
Yeah.
it's just it's energy, man. That's like the ultimate thing, is that it's energy, man. Um,
Mhm.
as I pull out one of my other decks now, because now I'm gotta look and see.
I know.
Um, but that is so interesting. Because what I was going to go into is how strength shows not only passion, but it shows that animalistic instinct,
Mm-hmm.
which is where I was going with that, which also fits with those ideas that we were talking about justice, because it's that innate knowing, that innate feeling and following those pieces. Um, it's such good stuff.
It is. I know.
um,
And it does. It kind of just shows that like maybe at that point of your journey, are you taking it more as like a um like conscious choice, or are you going to that more maybe a primal place? And with the strength card, it's really about your self-discipline. It's like taking those urges and what you've learned and your knowing, and kind of manipulating your urges to move you forward instead of just impulsively reacting. And with that image of the woman, usually with the Rider Waite holding the lion's mouth open, she's opening it gently. So this shows to me that she has been working with that lion since it was a cub, and there is a level of trust between them because of how effortlessly she's holding that primal instinct. This is something practiced. She has honed in on it.
yes, that that taming of the beast, that mastery of your strength. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's rationality and balance.
Mm-hmm. It is. And it's part of that, like having that calmness come over you when you come to a situation and you come through all these trials and tribulations and you know yourself and where you stand. There's this calmness that comes over you. And the first time you experience it, it's almost eerie. I remember a moment where I had this a woman that she just wanted an altercation with me. She just had a problem and she wanted to like start yelling. And I remember like almost stepping outside of myself and to the side and like viewing the situation and thinking to myself, oh, she wanted this to happen. Like, this is what she's been like trying to get out of me as a rise. And that eerie calm to just like, oh, well, I don't have to engage in this. I don't have to bite back. I don't have to play this game. I can choose another way.
Oh,
That is the
exactly.
essence of strength card to me.
Oh, yes. And it is so interesting as I look at as I pulled out these cards. So, and in this deck, strength is 8 and justice is 11. But it's so interesting because this deck, I'll have to take a picture of them and send them to you. And I'll post a picture of them in the comments here too. But there's behind strength is that flower of life being born from the seed of life geometry.
Oh, cool.
And behind justice is another symbol that is similar, but I cannot remember its name. But it's like the infinite lotus petals. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
um Behind justice, and I love those two together because again, in looking at these, which I know I'm kind of getting off topic with these, it's just so cool how they resonate with each other. It's so interesting. I see why they would have flipped them and how that could still work. It's just so
Yes.
interesting. Anyways, I digress in that. But yes, you're totally right about that interpretation of strength and how it relates into the decisions that people make and where they're the way that they're viewing things in their own
Mhm.
lives. It's so interesting.
It is.
Um
It's being aware of your unconscious gut instinct desires, but then also translating them through conscious awareness of it and choice made through it.
yes.
So it's recognizing, I have this little note here, recognizing the need and desire, but then finding the ways to fulfill it in the most constructive way.
Yes. Which
I love that.
in which yes, it's perfect and also leads us into the next card. I love how they just kind of, which,
It
we're going
does.
over the fool's journey, but this is what they do. They feed into the next piece, because the next piece being introspection and looking at soul searching
Mm-hmm.
in the Hermit.
Right. I love the Hermit card. It's one of my favorites
I
because
I have a love-hate relationship with the Hermit card because there's many times I don't want to do soul searching and it tries to make me.
yeah, but you have to take yourself into this space where the only light source is coming from within you. And you can
Yes.
illuminate. It reminds me of like kids when you turn off the light at night in their bedroom, and suddenly the pile of clothing on a chair becomes a boogeyman, right? And it's like,
Yes.
oh, and so in your life, you have these boogeyman things that you don't want to look at, you don't want to touch, you just want to shut the door on. But if you were to simply take yourself in there with a flashlight, you'd go, oh, well, that's not so bad. Now that I'm looking at it, like I can actually handle that, you know?
Oh, 100%. This card, uh, that that leads me into the ideas again of touching into those fears of uncertainty and the fear of
Mm-hmm.
the unknown, the fear of what is in the darkness. Um, because the symbols that are in the Hermit, his lamp can only go so far,
Yep.
but he also has a staff that he uses
Mm-hmm.
to guide him. So
Mm-hmm.
for what he cannot see, he can feel. And
Mm-hmm.
that is so much inner work and inner trust and working with the subconscious mind. And I love that analogy of like the clothes on the chair being the boogeyman. It is perfect.
And even if it's something else that's bigger, a bigger trauma, it's allowing yourself to be guided with help, usually, to be objective and to remove the emotion from it and using your tools to be objective about what it is and what it means and how you choose then again to align yourself with or not.
Yes. Very, very much. Because when we dive into self-discovery, I'm in that I'm reminded of all of the people that I've met in my life who have said that they hate themselves or they hate where they have gone or what has happened to them. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm always drawn to, well, why haven't you done that dive into self-discovery?
Mm-hmm.
And there are many times when I come across these people and I ask this question, and their answer will be, well, I have. And I kind of give them the side eye. I'm not gonna lie, I kind of
Right.
give them the side eye, and I'm like, but have you though? Because
Mm-hmm.
when you take ownership of the decisions that you've made and the
Mm-hmm.
actions, whether they be reactionary or not, and I think that is a big part that people miss in this, is
Mm-hmm.
even if your actions are a reaction, that is a choice
Right.
you have made.
Yep.
And when you
Yep.
make that choice, there goes the door. It is open. You are moving through it. You are
Mm-hmm.
using your willpower, like in the chariot, to take that directive. And that is where you're going. So, when you're avoiding that true self discovery, you can't see that even your reactions have played out in a way that has determined what's happening.
Right. The hermit is really about being comfortable with yourself,
Yes.
being totally comfortable, standing alone, sitting alone, isolated inside with just yourself. And I like to tell people that you're always doing your best. Your best just
Yes.
doesn't always look the same. And knowing what you know now, your best could be better. Or you could be having an off day, you don't feel good, but you reacted, but that was still just the best you had at that moment. And the hermit is about being okay with that.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a tough one. That's a tough one because you think you should be better or do better or have done things different, but it's just being okay and accepting your role in how you either played into something or reacted to something or you know and getting
Right.
good with that.
And I think that is a big part that people also miss. And yes, yes, I said the thing. But what happens from that is when your unhappiness stems from the decisions that you've made, you're clearly not sitting with the decisions that you've made and being okay and accepting of those.
Mm-hmm.
And you're
Yeah,
like,
here's a
well, that was the only choice I had. It may have been
right.
the only choice you had, but you have to be like, you have to find that acceptance in there.
Yes. So there's a quote in my book here, from Alfred Douglas, who is a philosopher, in relation to the hermit. He says, "Life may be compared to a piece of embroidery, of which during the first half of his time a man gets sight of the right side, and during the second half of the wrong. The wrong side is not so pretty as the right, but it is more instructive. It shows the way in which the threads have been worked together."
Oh, I love that.
I know. That's a
That
good
is
one.
fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Yep.
am actually, we are coming up on, we're coming up on like another half hour. I will unfortunately have to go soon, so we should pick this up again next week if that is okay with you.
Yep, that sounds great.
Awesome. This has been wonderful and fun, and thank you to everybody that asked questions. And next week we will start up with, we'll touch on what we've talked about, but we'll start up with the Wheel of Fortune, which is a complicated card, and people don't think it's as complicated as it is.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I think that's a great stopping point for us for right now and a great starting point for next time.
Yes, thank you so much as always for joining me. I love talking tarot and energy with you so much. And I will talk to you. I'll talk to you before next week, but I will talk to you next week, friend.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. You have a great day.
You too.